Every pilot wants that complex badge, the blue lever, the adrenaline rush of tucking up the wheels, the swagger of a real aircraft. But behind the prestige of retractable gear lies a trap. For most owners, gaining just 10 knots of speed can double your insurance and triple your shop bills. Is the ego boost worth the mounting risks and costs nobody brags about in the hangar? The numbers and the casualties tell a different story. So why does this myth still get signed off? A fresh pilot sits across from the instructor, hands still shaking a little from the last landing. The logbook opens and the pen hovers for a second. There is a pause, a look, and then a signature. The complex endorsement. It is not just ink, it is a rite of passage. Suddenly, you are not just a student anymore. You are a pilot with a blue lever between your knees and a story to tell at the next pancake breakfast. The first time that gear handle moves, it is pure adrenaline. The wheels rumble, the airframe shudders, and the nose lifts just a hair. You wait, 1, 2, 3, green lights go dark. You are clean. You are fast. You are part of the club now. Every instructor knows the look, the grin that says, "I made it." That moment is baked into the culture. Flight schools sell it as a milestone. The FAA requires it if you want to fly anything with retractable gear, a controllable propeller, and flaps. It is the difference between a trainer and a traveler. The hangar talk changes too. Suddenly, you are swapping stories about gear cycles and emergency cranks instead of just pattern work. There is a quiet pressure to move up, to prove you are not just a weekend warrior. The marketing feeds off this. Brochures from the 70s promised 160 knots and cross-country glory. The Piper Arrow, the Mooney M20, the Beach Bonanza were not just airplanes. They were tickets to a different identity. The implication is clear: real pilots fly retracts. Fixed gear is for students and rental fleets. The blue lever is the grown-up toy. But underneath the pride, there is something else. The instructor's hand lingers on the checklist just a second longer. The instructor says, "Do not forget the gear every time." There is a reason for the ritual. The system is more complicated now. One more switch, one more thing to remember. The badge comes with baggage, but in that moment, nobody cares. The new endorsement is a trophy, a license to swagger. The hangar floor fills with stories. Some pilots chase the next endorsement, the next upgrade, always looking for the next lever to pull. The rest watch. They know that the shine wears off, and the real test is not in the logbook. It is in the hours, the landings, and the bills that come later. But nobody thinks about that when the ink is still fresh and the blue lever is calling your name. Every hangar has its own pecking order, and it is not always about hours in the logbook. It is about what is parked on the ramp. The pilot who pulls up in a retractable Mooney or Bonanza gets a certain look. The wheels disappear, and so does the line between weekend pilot and serious aviator. It becomes social currency, traded in sideways glances and half-joking ribbing over coffee. You can fly 100 perfect circuits in a fixed-gear Cessna, but the minute you taxi up in a plane with a blue lever, the conversation changes. Someone always asks, "How fast does she go?" before you have even shut down. Nobody asks about fuel burn or insurance. That is not what gets you bragging rights. Hangar talk is a strange animal. The stories grow longer with every retelling, and the gear gets faster with every hangar door slammed shut. There is a quiet contest playing out every Saturday. Who is flying the real airplane? Who is still stuck in the trainer? The pressure is subtle, but it is everywhere. You start to hear it in the questions. So when are you moving up? Or thinking about getting your complex time? Nobody wants to be the last one in the pattern with the gear hanging out. It is not just pilots. Marketing teams know exactly how to play this game. Brochures show gleaming paint and gear tucking up into the wing, promising speed and adventure. There is always a shot of the yoke and the blue lever front and center, as if that lever is the key to the kingdom. The message is clear. Fixed gear is for students and rental fleets. Retractable is for those who have arrived. You do not see ads bragging about maintenance intervals or insurance rates. The brochures sell a dream, not a spreadsheet. Behind the banter and the posturing, there is a quiet anxiety. Nobody wants to admit they bought an airplane for the way it looks on the ramp. The truth is, image counts for more than most will say out loud. The right paint job, the right badge, and most of all, the right gear lever matter. It is a hangar full of adults, but playground rules still apply. Show up with the wrong airplane and you will hear about it for weeks. Show up with the right one and nobody asks how much you paid for your last annual. This is how the myth keeps rolling. The pressure to move up is not just about flying further or faster, it is about looking the part. The blue lever becomes social armor, proof you belong. But pride and peer pressure come with a price that nobody wants to talk about until it is too late. In the world of general aviation, the numbers do not lie. For all the swagger and salesmanship around retractable gear, the math is stubborn. On a typical 200 horsepower single-engine airplane, tucking the wheels buys you just 10, maybe 12 knots of extra cruise speed. That is the 10-knot rule. It is not a guess. Flight tests and computer models show it year after year. Take a Piper Arrow with its gear swinging up into the wing. The books say 135 knots true airspeed. Park it next to a modern fixed gear Cirrus SR20, same horsepower, but with those slick fiberglass wheel pants. The Cirrus cruises at 155 knots. The fixed gear plane is faster, not because the pilot is braver, but because the airframe is cleaner. No holes cut into the wing for wheels to hide in, no extra drag from doors, linkages, or gaps. Aerodynamics has moved on. Back in the 1940s, wheels were about as streamlined as a brick. Retracting them made sense. But today, a good wheel pant, the kind you see on every new Cirrus, Diamond, or TTX, wipes away 95% of the drag penalty. That is not marketing fluff. Wind tunnel data and computational fluid dynamics simulations agree. Engineers ran the numbers. Fairings recover almost all the lost speed without adding a single moving part. The difference is so small that most pilots cannot spot it on the airspeed indicator. 8 knots here, 12 knots there, depending on the model. Cessna Cardinal retractable version versus the fixed gear version, about 8 knots. Beach Sierra, maybe 15 knots if you are lucky. But you are paying for every one of those knots, not just in dollars, but in weight, complexity, and time spent chasing gremlins in the system. For any plane under 200 knots, the speed advantage of retractable gear has all but evaporated. Manufacturers know it. That is why the best-selling planes on the ramp today, the Cirrus SR20 and SR22, the Diamond DA40, and the Cessna TTX, all keep their wheels out in the breeze. They are not slow, they are not basic. They are engineered to cheat the air with smooth, uninterrupted surfaces. The gear legs are shaped like teardrops, the fairings are molded to the millimeter, and the airflow stays attached. So when someone tells you their retractable is a rocket ship, ask for the numbers. Ask how much they are really gaining and at what cost. The truth is, you are chasing 10 knots. That is it. 10 knots for a system that is heavy, expensive, and itching to fail at the worst possible moment. The numbers do not care about pride. They just keep adding up. A retractable gear system is not just a lever and a set of doors. It is a web of motors, hydraulic pumps, steel tubing, and wiring that runs from the firewall to the tail. Every part has to be strong enough to take a beating, but light enough not to drag the whole airplane down. The reality is, it is not light. The numbers add up fast. By the time you count the actuators, the gear legs, the reservoirs, and the emergency hand crank, you are looking at about 200 pounds of hardware. That is not a guess. That is what the scales say when you strip a Piper Arrow or a Mooney M20 down to bare bones. 200 pounds may not sound like much until you start playing the payload game. In practical terms, it is the difference between flying with a full tank and having to leave a friend behind on the ramp. For a typical 4-seat single, that is an entire adult passenger or enough fuel to stretch your range by another hour. It is not just a number on a spec sheet. It is a real trade-off every time you load up for a weekend trip. The airplane does not care if those pounds are a person, a bag, or a pile of metal stuffed into the wing. The weight comes off the top, no matter what. Owners like to imagine that retractable gear turns their plane into a rocket. The math is stubborn. 200 pounds of dead weight means you are always making choices. Do you want to bring your family and bags, or do you want to land with a comfortable fuel reserve? You cannot have it all. The gear system does not just eat into your speed, it eats into your freedom. You start leaving things behind, you start watching the scales instead of the horizon. The engineers who designed these systems in the 1970s were working with what they had. Hydraulic pumps were not small or efficient. The steel was heavy, and the backup mechanisms were built to survive a hard landing, not to save you a few gallons of avgas. Even today, that weight penalty has not gone away. The modern fixed-gear planes, Cirrus, Diamond, Cessna TTX, skip the entire mess. Their gear legs are made of composite or aluminum, shaped like a teardrop, and weigh next to nothing. The difference is obvious when you look at the numbers: more payload, more range, less compromise. Every mechanic knows the look on an owner's face when they see the empty seats and the full tanks and realize something has to give. The retractable gear system is invisible until it is not. It is always there, taking up space, taking up weight, and taking a bite out of every flight. And for what? 10 knots on the airspeed indicator if you are lucky. The next time someone brags about their retractable, ask them what they would rather carry: a passenger or a pile of steel and hydraulic fluid. Most of the time, it is the system that wins. A retractable gear airplane doesn't just look expensive, it is expensive every single year. The moment that plane rolls into the shop for its annual inspection, the real work begins. Mechanics have to jack the whole airframe off the ground, one wheel at a time, balancing thousands of pounds of aluminum on 3 skinny stands. Then comes the ritual, the gear swing. The system gets cycled up and down over and over while a mechanic crawls around with a flashlight and a checklist, listening for clicks and watching for leaks. There is no skipping this step. The FAA requires it, because if even one of the 50 moving parts in that system is out of spec, the whole airplane gets grounded. The most common culprit is a microswitch that is off by less than a millimeter, about the thickness of a credit card. That is all it takes to kill the green light in the cockpit. When that happens, the owner gets a call and the meter starts running. Sometimes it is just an adjustment. Sometimes it is a hunt for a part that has not been made since the Reagan administration. Either way, the bill is coming. A simple, fixed-gear airplane skips all of this. No jacks, no cycling, no switches to adjust. With retractables, every annual inspection can add $1,000, $2,000, sometimes $3,000 to the tab, just for the privilege of hiding the wheels. The jack stands become a symbol of money bleeding out of the airplane, year after year. Every mechanic knows it, and every owner learns it the hard way. The gear handle gets all the glory, but the real test comes when it does not work. Picture yourself at pattern altitude, distracted, and suddenly the gear will not come down. Now you are sweating, digging for the emergency crank. It is never in an easy spot, usually jammed between the seats or buried under a flap. You start cranking, 50, maybe 100 turns, hands slipping, adrenaline spiking. Every rotation feels heavier as the wind loads the gear doors. The checklist says keep going. The cockpit feels like a sauna, and your brain runs every worst-case scenario. Will it lock? Will it hold? The only thing louder than the warning horn is your own heartbeat. This is not just a mechanical inconvenience. It is the reason insurance underwriters treat retractable gear like a loaded die. They see the claims, gear-up landings, busted props, engines torn down after a single mistake. For a new pilot with less than 100 hours in type, the premium for a retractable can hit $8,000 a year, if you can even get a quote. The same pilot in a fixed gear, Cirrus or Diamond will pay closer to $1,500. That is not a typo. The insurance market has gotten so tight, some carriers will not even touch retractables for low-time owners. They are tired of paying for curled props and torn belly skins. All this for a system that, below 200 knots, barely moves the needle on performance. The financial penalty is not just a line on a spreadsheet. It is a wall that keeps average pilots out of the retractable club, no matter how shiny the brochure looks. Today, fixed-gear aircraft outsell retractables by a wide margin, because reliability and lower risk are not just practical, they are essential. As insurance premiums soar and shop costs climb, pilots face a clear choice: chase a fading badge of complexity, or embrace proven engineering that delivers peace of mind. In modern aviation, true confidence is not hidden behind a lever, it is built into every landing. Let me know where you stand in the comments below.